Hello everyone. I'm getting ready to join the shoulders for Orkney. So I have here, just rearranging my needles. Okay, let me show you what I got. So, front of the jumper. As you can see, it's a V-neck. So I knitted up to this point and then divided for the V, and it's nicely centered, so I'm really happy about that. It's time to join the shoulders. Now, normally when you cast off shoulders, they tell you to cast them off in a sort of stair step. And you see here, what I've done is I've not cast any off. Instead, I've rewritten the pattern to use short rows. So actually, you can see it's higher on the inside and goes lower to the outside. So otherwise, it would have been sort of cast off in 3 lots of stair-steppy stitches. So I've kept those stitches live so I can do a 3-needle cast off. This is much nicer for shoulders. And it's a nice strong seam. I don't have to finish it and then seam it together. I'm gonna do it in one step, and it's really cool. Much faster too. So one key thing I did is I made sure that I had the same number of stitches here, 31, that I did on the back side, which I also did with short rows, which is also 31. So 31 and 31, so they match, and so you need the exact same number of stitches. Hey Woben, so you need the same number of stitches to do a 3-needle cast off. So I've got all 4 bits, so I'm gonna join, obviously, the front and back to the shoulders, but I'm gonna do it from the inside out. So I'm gonna turn it inside out. And look, I know it looks like there's a ton of ends still to weave in. I've actually woven in like half of them so far. So you can see the inside is mostly nice. Like I've done, there's the start of the round. So actually there were a zillion ends straight up there that are all woven in. Luckily for me, I've had like a ton of all hands and kickoffs at work. So I was able to get a lot of end weaving in done while I was watching presentations and meetings. Okay. So what I'm gonna do now is I've folded it inside out, and again, I'm gonna match up the shoulders. So there we go, inside out. And I'm gonna do this even despite having all these ends. Part of the reason is I'm actually gonna weave some of the ends into the seam. Yeah, so I'm not going to worry about them. They're all sort of out of the way. So I'm going to leave that for the moment. Actually, if I flip it around, you'll see I did weave them in on the back side. So the back side is nicely done. That's all woven in. Very nice. Okay, so I've got the back and the front here on needles. And you see I've got 2 needles. Well, obviously for a 3-needle cast off, I need a 3rd, which is here. And I just need to pick a yarn the color to do, to cast off in. I'm actually thinking I might use, where is it? The dark brown. Just because it's the color I've got the most of. And you're not gonna see it anyway. It's on the inside of the garment. Where's the dark brown? There it is. Yeah, I've got the most of that. I might as well use that. So I'm just gonna pull off at the end. Okay. Now what I'm going to do is I'm actually going to be knitting off both needles at the same time with a 3rd needle, and knitting them together and casting off at the same time. So that sounds complicated, but it's really not. So here we go. I'm going to move the stitches to the ends of the needles. And again, remember exact same numbers. So they're effectively paired up. I'm going to knit a stitch from the front with a stitch from the back. So I'm using a 3rd needle, and 3rd needle is actually a size up, just because it was the one I had handy, but that's also a good idea as well, because it'll make sure that you're not doing this too tightly. Okay, so I'm putting the needle through that first stitch as if I'm gonna knit it, but I'm actually gonna put it through both. The first one on the first needle, front needle, and the first one on the back needle. So I'm actually through both of those. Maybe I should go to the other camera for this. There we go. So you can see I'm actually through the front stitch on both needles. I'm going to take my wool, leaving myself a tail, because again, we're going to weave all these ends in. I'm going to pull through both of those stitches, and then both of those stitches can slide off the needle. So I'm just going to slide both of those off the tip. Okay, so I've got one stitch on the left needle now. Let's do it again. So again, into the first one, into the second one, knit both of them from here. Make sure I'm not using my tail. And again, both of those stitches can come off. So now what I need to do is I'm actually going to do the cast off. You see I've got 2 stitches here, and that's the position I can cast off from. So I'm just going to use one of the needle tips and lift the stitch over to cast off. That's a 3 needle cast off. We're just going to do that all the way across the row. So again, knitting the stitch from the front needle together with its counterpart from the back needle. Both of them come off, and then do the cast off. And again, try and not make it too tight. And you can only do this with live stitches. If you've cast it off your shoulders, well, then you got no option but to try and sew it together. And I just find, you know, mattress stitch or whatever you use at the shoulders, I just find it a bit bulky. And, you know, you got to be very careful that it looks neat. This, and in a few, I'll show you what it looks like. It's going to just leave us with a really nice little row on the inside and a beautiful seam. Of course, the catch with doing this is that most patterns are written least common denominator and to save space. So they're written with this stair-steppy shoulder cast off, shoulder shaping. So you have to rewrite it. So if you want to do this, they're actually, and what I actually did, I reread it before I did this, is there's a, sorry, not Ravelry, there's a Nitty article. If you Google Nitty, shoulder shaping 3 needle cast off or short row shoulder shaping, you'll find it, and it talks about how you rewrite a traditional pattern to make it written so that the stitches stay live and you use short rows. And so I actually did that, and I'll show you on the pattern after I finish this first shoulder. Can actually see how I physically did rewrite it. I rewrote the instructions out so that I wouldn't get confused. So if you can see here, what we're getting, that line of brown, that's our shoulder seam actually, right down the middle there. Nice and even. Now I've heard people say that you shouldn't do this 3 needle cast off for a very bulky sweater. Like if you were knitting a super chunky sweater, because the weight of it, a mattress stitch sort of shoulder seam is bulkier, but it's also a bit stronger probably. So if you're using a very chunky wool, I probably would not do the 3 needle cast off. This is a DK weight, so I think it's fine. I have used it on thicker wool and it's okay. But if it was a very heavy, like cabled sweater, like something quite thick and quite heavy, I probably would do a traditional seamed shoulder. But for a finer jumper, definitely do this. Again, I'm trying to not pull it too tight as I do that. Same as you would any cast off. You don't want to cast it off too tight. A seam that's too tight, in addition to sort of, you know, pulling and not stretching. I think they also wear out faster because, you know, the wool is stretched tighter and will rub. Okay, so again, through the front stitch, 1 stitch on the front needle and 1 stitch on the back needle together, I knit it, and then I do the cast off, just all the way along. I'm so excited to try this on. Once I do this, I should be able to. And then decide what I'm going to do about the sleeves. through the front stitch on the front needle and the stitch on the back needle, knit them together, cast off. And so if you're just joining, I said the key to doing this is you must have live stitches, so you can't cast off your shoulder stitches, even if the pattern tells you to. And you need the same number on the back as on the front. And so I made sure that I had 31 for both shoulders. Basically, I did the back. You'll recall I did the back of the jumper first. So more or less following the pattern because it was a cardigan pattern originally. And then for the front, since I'm modifying it to be a sweater and be a V-neck, that was where I had to do a little bit more sort of, 3 and 3, perfect. A little bit more sort of math and jiggering it to get it to end up right. What are you saying, Woban? Yeah, you've been putting off seaming until it's cooler is double held worsted. Woo! Yeah, that'll be a thick one. Not gonna get a lot of wear out of that in Australia. Come on, that first stitch is a little tight. A needle in there, needle in there. Can't wait to wear this one. I don't know if you can see out the window there, but it snowed this week. And it is currently like -10 or -8 in Munich. It's pretty cold. That's Celsius, so maybe 20s in Fahrenheit. Okay, I'm down to the last one. So knit that last stitch on the front needle with the last stitch on the back needle. Oh, come on. Hang on, I must have split the wool. Okay. And then, okay. I'm gonna leave a tail on that. And just as you would with a normal cast off, just pull the end through. And there is our shoulder seam. And so you just end up with, you can't even barely see it. It's that little ridge along the top. So it's a cast off edge on the inside. And on the outside, if I flip it back around, perfect. Oh, I really like that. It took some kind of massaging to make sure. Obviously, I wanted to end both the front and the back on the same row as well. I didn't want the back higher than the front. And I'm really happy with that. That's nice. Woo! I love it when a plan comes together. Okay, now for the other shoulder. Cool. So I did that one from the outside to the inside. I can't remember if you're supposed to do it that way. It might be that you always go from the inside to the... I can't remember if there's a, like, set way you're supposed to do it. How about I'll do the second one to match, at least, to mirror it. So what I will do, actually, is... So if I'm going to go from the outside to the inside, I need the needle tips. It's great, because I've got these interchangeables. I can just sort of snap the tips on and off as needed. Thanks, Woban. Yeah, I'm really pleased with how this whole project is turning out. It's considering when I pulled it out of that bag at New Year's and it was not in a good shape. Now I know what I need to do is I need to pull this through these stitches. Use my extender cable. Just get myself situated here. This is just to avoid having to shift all the stitches. I can now just pull it through onto that cable. Perfect. And now I'll put that tip back on. Okay. That one and that one are gonna match up. I'll flip it around. This is the side with all the ends to weave in. Okay. Okay. Just gonna have to deal with the controlled chaos of all those ends. Okay. Got them all squished up. Good to go. I'll go back to the wide angle. All right. Second 3-needle cast off. Well, Ben, I saw a lovely tip for bottom-up color work. Use the body as a bag for the yarn. What a genius idea. Hadn't thought of that. Yeah, well, it ended up, you know, because it was funny. The original version, the reason I frogged it was too small. I went up, they were called needle sizes, and I went up a size of the pattern, and it's actually going to be quite roomy now. So I hope, I'm wearing it regardless, but I have a feeling it's now a lot roomier. So we'll see what it looks like when I try it on. Eek. I hope it's not too baggy. Doesn't matter, I'm wearing it regardless. Okay, needle into both stitches. Get in the wool. Okay. So there's the first one, and off. Second one, okay, just make sure I don't drop too many stitches off, and then I can go ahead and cast that first stitch off. This is so much faster than seaming. I mean, also, I can do it before I block. You know, if you're going to seam it, you really want to block it first, which means weaving in all the ends. Sorry, I'm just making sure I'm going into those stitches cleanly. Weaving in all the ends and then washing it and blocking it, which is, you know, has its... Some people find that fun. But this, you get to actually get to the seaming a little faster. I will be honest, I was having fun weaving in the ends during those all hands calls. It's very satisfying to see them all disappearing as you go. And then sleeve decisions. So I've just, as you know, if you've been watching me, I was getting worried I was going to run out of wool. A few of the colors. In particular. And so I actually did find some local wool shops last week who stock Rowan and ordered 3 balls from one of them. So I've ordered more of the purple color, more of the teal color, and more of the camel color that's used in the ribbing. Actually, I didn't order the camel. I ordered gray, which is also in the corrugated ribbing. And unfortunately, the gray is sold out. I tried 2 different shops and neither of them have it in stock. And so I don't know that I'll need it, but I'm on the lookout for Rowan felted tweed in carbon. If anybody has some, I messaged my friend Donna back in Australia because I think she's got a fair amount of this stashed, but I'm gonna have to reach out to some more yarn stores possibly, depending. I mean, I guess the question is if I could do the long sleeves. One thing I need to look at is the pattern for the sleeves. So this pattern is weird, Orkney. Orkney's sleeves use an entirely different chart from the body. It's not the same chart for the body. And it even includes a color that isn't in the body. It's got a yellowish color that isn't even used in the body is on the sleeves. And so my wonder is, maybe that means the sleeves will use different ratios. And it's okay, like I won't need any more of the gray. I think I'm still going to need some more, though, just at the very minimum to do around the neck and to do the cuffs. Like, I can't imagine with what little I've got left I'd be able to squeak it out. So I think I'm going to have to find a ball of it from somewhere. But check this. Oh, sorry, I'm out of the frame. Check this out. I'll show you. So the 3 balls I did get. Have a look at the photo. I don't know if you can tell. The purple's pretty close. The camel's all right. If I don't know if you can tell in that photo, but the last color, the teal color, it's watery is the color name. It is a very different dye lot. One of them, like the one I've been using, is quite green, and the one I received is quite blue. So I don't know if it's just dye lot variants or if they've changed the, like, granted, mine's from 8 years ago and bought on another continent. Not particularly surprising, but wow, it's a lot different than the other two. But you know, the good thing is with a pattern like this, that color is not going to be in a big group, so you're never going to notice it anyway. It's fine. But I was a little shocked when I took it out of the box this morning how different. It's a good reminder about dye lots that, you know, if I was knitting a whole garment in that, I would be out of luck because there's no way to disguise that big. Well, it's all through it. It's the tealy green color. It's this blue green. And I'll show you. I'll grab the balls here in a second and show you. If you can see the difference if I hold it up to the camera here, if I put it under the iPhone camera. I mean, obviously I didn't even try and get matching dye lots because there's just, yeah, no way. And even the shop I bought it from back in Australia is long gone out of business. So there was no chance of getting the matching. That's why Donna worked at that shop. So, and I know she like abused that employee discount before she left. I think that's how I actually used her discount. So I'm hoping she has a ball of it somewhere. Otherwise, someone on Ravelry will have a ball, right? I won't need very much. Okay, down to the last couple stitches. So one off the front needle, one off the back needle. Cast off. And then the last one. Front needle, back needle, knit, cast off, and I could try and go direct to Rowan, but you know, Brexit, like getting anything shipped from the UK to here right now is actually kind of a pain in the ass. So I don't know if that would work, frankly. That's probably why, because all the shops I ordered it from that were out of stock, the gray, they had no idea when they would get stock, because it's probably because of that. Anyway, all right, I got 2 shoulders cast off, which now if I turn it right side. Oh, folks. Folks, we have a sweater body. I'm actually pleased with that V-neck. I wasn't really sure, you know, since I was making this up, how deep to make the V and when to start the V. And I found a sort of 8-ply men's sweater vest pattern that told me to start it, you know, 50 centimeters up from the bottom for a size approximately as tall as I am. So that's what I went with. All right, y'all are going to have to hang tight for 5 minutes while I go try this on, okay? I'll be right back. I'll wear it. I'll come back. I'll wear it. 1 sec. Hey, this is pretty good. This is pretty good. Can I actually turn this camera up so you can see? Except I'm upside down, so no, that's not gonna work. Check it out. Like, it needs a block. You can tell where I changed needle sizes. This stomachy bit is a little bit looser and kind of baggier through the fair isle, and it's changed about right here is where I decided to go down a needle size, and so it's a firmer knit at the top. But I think with a wash and a block, a lot of that'll block out. But I'm actually really liking this. The question is to sleeve or not to sleeve. What do you reckon? I don't actually own any sweater vests. You know, yeah, I think it's a good V. Like, it's not too deep of a V-neck. I figured if I wore a shirt underneath, you know, you want to see like a little bit of it. It's quite comfortable like this with the long sleeve underneath. I don't know. Long sleeve, short sleeve. I can work on the ends, weaving in the ends, finishing the embroidery, and put off this decision. Maybe I'll put it up on Twitter and take a poll. Let me switch back to my other sweater now. Yeah, I think I got a few different options. So I think what I'll do now is I'll just work on weaving in these ends, and I still have, you'll recall I'm doing embroidery on this section, and I haven't finished all of it, so I can do that too. But I did want to show you guys something else real quick. So I bought something this week, and I've talked about this on the stream before. You know, a few of these fine 4-ply jumpers like this one I'm wearing that I made, a couple of them, you know, they get pilly. All jumpers, all sweaters get pilly, especially, you know, under the arms and stuff. You get the little fuzz, the balls that form. For any wool that's sort of soft and loosely spun, you'll get that. And so I jokingly said I wanted to buy like the most powerful sweater shaver known to man. Because I bought a couple of these little crappy ones, battery powered ones at craft stores, and they break. They fall apart. You know, I've gone through, I think, 2 of them so far. And so I went on Amazon the other day to see what the options were. And I ended up buying this sucker. Okay. Here, I'll show you what the whole thing looks like. Right. So it was nearly 30 euros on Amazon.de. It's a German-made one. Well, I've been saying, yeah, I made a sweater out of baby alpaca and it pills when you glance at it. Yeah, same. Like, a couple of things, like that white one with the stag's head on it that I did, just is so pilly and felty. And so this one, yeah, it does look like a person. It does look a little bit sus, doesn't it? But the reason I bought it was, first of all, it's got a built-in battery. You charge it off USB and claims it'll run for a really long time off a single charge. It came with 3 different shave. I mean, they're the same, but it's got 2 replacement discs. Those discs with the 6 razor blades. That's the cutting edge. So I've got extra cutting, so it actually comes apart. The other cool thing I like is it's got an adjuster, which sort of makes this grill, moves it further out, so you can start with it at the high position, so you don't worry about maybe cutting a hole in your knitting. If I pull that, the front just pulls off. There you go. And then this thing's quite dusty. Unscrews. And there's the blades. You can see it's got some fluff in it, actually. Let me empty it out. And it came with a little brushy, so I can clean it out. But it works pretty damn well. It's like getting whole new sweaters. Like, I feel like I really revitalized a couple. I'll show you one example. So Lenatus there, which is the one I finished most recently, that was already starting to pill under the arms. So here you can see on the left, you can see the sort of long stringy pills forming there. And after I did it on the right, they're just gone. It's like brand new again. Uh, I mean, look, it's I don't know, it's not like ultra powerful. Like it works under the same principle as the crappy little ones. It just seems slightly better made. So I'm optimistic it won't fall apart as quickly as the old one did. Just cleaning some more fluff out of these blades now. And yeah, the little handle is the receptacle, and it's filled up on me several times. That's how effective it is. So yeah, I've been having a lot of fun shaving my sweaters. I put on Twitter, I said that, you know, it gives me a feeling of control in a world full of chaos to take a sweater that's all pilly and just go to town on it with the shaver, and it comes out looking beautiful. It's so nice. And similarly, weaving in ends also gives me a sense of accomplishment. So I'm just going to do that now. Might not be the most exciting thing for y'all to watch, but it's important to do. And the great news with this is I've just been discovering, like, this wool and the pattern, you don't actually have to worry that much about weaving it in behind the same color. It doesn't actually matter. You can't see it on the front. So it's a little bit more forgiving. Like Lenatus, like that design around the top. In this one, around the top, I had to make sure that I wasn't weaving a color that would show through on the front. Here, it doesn't really matter. You working on anything, Woben? You said you've got a very thick sweater, huh? Doing any weaving lately? Knitting 2 sleeves, like that's part of the calculus. Just feels like it might be boring to knit 2 sleeves. It's a lot of knitting. But it will also look pretty cool. Like, I feel like it'll be more impressive with the sleeves. And then what will I knit? This was my New Year's resolution. I'll have completed my New Year's resolution in February. Actually, I think Rod needs a new jumper, new sweater. Oh yeah, you told me about that, Woben. You're sampling some hand-dyed yarn for friends. That's cool. Dyeing, I got a couple friends back in Sydney who do dyeing. I'm impressed by it. Not something it's another hobby. I've only dyed one thing. I knitted, there's a famous pattern by Elizabeth Zimmerman. Was it Elizabeth? No, or is it Ella Starmore? I think it's Zimmerman. The February baby sweater? February baby jacket. Yeah. And it's a little baby pattern. And a few years back, someone did a version for adults, the February lady sweater. And it was momentarily like a massive fad. It was a cute pattern. Sort of baby sweater upsized for a grown woman. And plus the chick in the pattern photo was really kind of cool with like her cool glasses, and it was knitted in a pretty color. And it was sort of a very viral moment pre-social media. And so we all knitted this thing. And I knitted it out of Cleckheaton Nature 8-ply, which was an alpaca wool blend that Cleckheaton did back in Australia. It's long since discontinued. First of all, it's itchy AF. Like, it's itchy. And I have a high tolerance for itching sweaters, but it was itchy. And it was in cream. And I don't look good in cream. It washes me out completely. I do not look good in cream. And so I knitted the thing, and then I was like, ugh, what am I going to do with this? And someone said, well, it's natural. You could dye it. And so I actually got some dyes, and you use different dyes for hair than you use for cotton, which I learned. And so I dyed it orange. I dyed it like a burnt orange, because I thought that might be an interesting one. And look, I didn't have a ginormous dye pot. I did it in a big stock pot. And so it actually, there were areas of color that ended up sort of more deeper and mottled than other areas of color. And needless to say, it was a good idea, poorly executed, and it was still itchy, and I hated it. So I think I eventually took it to the op shop. So I hope, I don't know if some hipster is wearing it around Newtown these days, but more power to them if they are. But yeah, not much of a dyer. All right, I was going to show you the colors of those wools. See if you can see the difference in the dye lot change. All right, so here's the one I've been using. All right, put it there. So that is Watery. It's like color 152 from Rowan. Yeah, here's the new bowl. Can you see the difference in the color? Can you see how much more blue this one is than this one? It's really quite noticeable. Like, especially in daylight. Yeah, this one is, it's the same color, but this one is more green and this one is more blue. But in this sort of a pattern, you're not gonna notice. It's fine. I mean, the purple, look, that's how much purple I was down to, just like a handful. Purple's, again, it's not perfect, but the purple's pretty close. But yeah, Rod actually said on the water, he's like, did your old one fade or something? I'm like, it's been stuffed in a sack. It's not like I left it sitting in the sun for 7 years. So it's just this batch was very different from the batch I happened to buy. Yeah, but see, there's no rows where you have multiple rows of it, to be honest with you. You really don't. It's all sort of, like, it's used in sort of sparing, look, maybe if I did like, that's one of the only bits where there's sort of significant blocks of it, but I think it's fine. Like, I need to look at the sleeve pattern and see. I mean, look, if I don't do sleeves, it doesn't matter because I don't need it. I just need to do the cuffs and the collar. If I do the sleeves, which I'm leaning towards, then I probably need some. Where shall I weave next? Let's just go around the V-neck. Very satisfying to clean this up. So I just tied all these into loose bows as I was going. So for the V-neck, I was saying, I looked at a similar pattern to figure out where to start the V. And then they suggested that I just do every other row, a knit two together. And so I did it 2 in from the edge. I did a decrease, and I did the decreases so that they run alongside, unlike the armhole ones where I angled the decreases into the armhole. For the necks, I actually ran it along for, decorative effect. Well, but I think the only person who'll be able to tell is you. Yeah, exactly. Like, what's the phrase? A man on a running horse would never be able to spot it. One reason to do the sleeves would just be to use up the wool like I do. Like these few colors I was worried of running out on, but I've still got quite a bit of everything else. Maybe doing the sleeves would be good just to use it up. If you want to see what the sleeves look like, by the way, let me put the actual... There's the link to the pattern on Ravelry, so you can see that the sleeves are completely different to the body. And you'll also see that the pattern is knitted, a lot tighter. This is I've oversized it. She's very twee and is wearing a very form-fitting little cardigan, and I don't wear those, so... Knit one for my... I have a cat. He would never wear anything in the first place. And he's actually back in Australia. We wanted to bring him with us. But he's actually quite an anxious little fellow. And I thought the chances of him surviving the plane journey to Germany were pretty slim. And so we're renting our house back in Australia to a friend. And she loves him and he loves her, so she's actually looking after him back in Australia. And I miss him terribly, but it felt like that was actually the best thing for him. He doesn't like strange people and strange places, and it just didn't feel very fair to drag him halfway around the world. So we get regular pictures and updates on him. Hopefully when we go back, he'll remember us. So what I like to do when I'm weaving in is sort of fold the fabric around to the front and just see if I need to, for example, this dark color, can I just weave it straight off to the right, or should I actually go left first just to close any holes or gaps forming? Especially when you've introduced a new color at an edge like that. I usually like to do that. I'll sort of go stitch to the left before I head back to the right. If you're just joining it, you actually miss the 3-needle cast off excitement. So if you go back to the beginning of the stream, you can see, one of the advantages of that technique is it's very fast. So I was able to complete the seams of both shoulders. That's the shoulder seam right there, very quickly. So if you go back to the beginning, you can see me actually do those shoulder seams with a 3-needle cast off. And now I'm weaving in ends because I've got a gazillion. I was very tempted last night when I was doing the short row shoulder shaping. I was like, oh, I should get online or make a video or something because that's a technique people might like to see. But WandaVision was on, and that's very exciting. And I kind of just wanted to get it done, so apologies. You missed the short row shoulder shaping. Oh, that's right. I was going to show you on the pattern how I rewrote it. I can do that. Let me just grab my pattern there. So on the iPad, let's go back out. So because someone always asks, I use an app on the iPad called Notability, but it's like Evernote or OneNote or, you know, any one of those. It's just you can make notes, you can drag in PDFs and pictures and things and write on them. So, you know, there's my chart, which I've been knitting from and marking up with lots of lines and all kinds of crap. And then here I took photos of the armhole shaping and the neck shaping and was ticking off my decreases as I went. And so here actually you see shape shoulders and back neck. Okay, it says on the right side, cast off 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. I'm making the biggest size, 10 stitches. Pattern until there are 24 stitches and turn. Ignoring the fact that I had twiddled the numbers anyway, I didn't have the exact same numbers. Basically, there's a cast off of 10 stitches. Then you're having some decreases at the neck edge. Casting off another 10, casting off the remaining 11. Remember I said we had 31 stitches? Got it, 10, 10, 11. So I rewrote it. So you see here underneath, I actually spent like 20 minutes working this out and writing it out. So knit in pattern, 34 stitches, place marker, turn. So rather than casting off those stitches, instead I stopped before I got to them and did a wrapping a stitch. So wrapping, and I wrote it out because I always forget wrapping, which way you wrap. Slip neck stitch, purlwise, yarn to all of that nonsense. So I wrote it out. I rewrote the pattern. And again, if you go to, let me just find that article for you because I'll put it in the chat. So Nitty short row shoulder shaping. There it is. Rewriting your pattern for short row shoulder shaping. So it's this article on Nitty. Yeah, at the same time in a pattern is always bad news. When you see that, you gotta write it out. And so I just find that to be the most helpful. So yeah, so I wrote it out. And then then I was able to do it because it was quite difficult. So that was for the back. And obviously on the back of the garment, you end up casting off some stitches in the middle. The back, casting off some stitches in the middle for the back of the neck. And then you actually do some decreases along the side of the neck as well. So that's that at the same time. So you're doing that. But yeah, wrote it all out. And then basically used that again on the front. So there's our front. But yeah, that Nitty article is the best source. And obviously, look, it's written for a specific pattern. Your mileage may vary, but I refer to that one a lot whenever I'm converting a pattern to use short row shoulder shaping, which is pretty much required if you want to do the 3 needle cast off. Yeah, feel free to ask questions if anybody wants to know anything. I'll do these 2 ends and then I'll do some of that duplicate stitch embroidery again. I think there's still a little bit left to do. So for anybody who missed it last time, I'll show you how to do Swiss darning or duplicate stitch for anyone who's never done that before. It's a fun tool to have in your arsenal. Yeah, the number of times I've knitted a pattern following along merrily, and then you see at the same time, oh crap, you know, after you've already done the thing. This is why I tell people read the pattern first, but sometimes you get caught up in just following the instructions mindlessly. Okay, let's do some embroidery. Oops, here's that pile of ends. It's so satisfying, it really is. Okay. Let's go back to turn it back right side out. So, you recall this motif here with the brown X's and the red stripe and the little blue things. This motif requires 3 colors in one row. It's the only one in the whole garment that does. Just that, like, what is that, like 12 rows or something, 10 rows? 3 colors in one row. 3 colors in one row, Fair Isle, is an absolute nightmare, you know? 2 colors. I've managed to figure out how to handle 2 colors, 1 color in each hand. I only have 2 hands. 3 colors is a nightmare. And so what I did, the solution I hit upon, which you can tell, is I actually knitted it with just 2 colors in a row. So either cream and the brown or red and the brown. And what I'm now doing is using duplicate stitch embroidery to add on the teal over the top, because ain't nobody got time to juggle 3 colors in one row. So I need that teal yarn, the one I was showing you all. Where'd you go? There it is. And so I'm just gonna pull off, I don't know, an arm length of it. And we call it duplicate stitch because you literally just stitch over the top of the existing knitting. So it does mean that those bits are double thick. So like if I run my finger over it, I can feel them raised up. They are noticeably thicker. But if you've got a situation like this, or you've got a design that just needs like a tiny bit of a color, I was saying before I knitted, I did some picture knitting for my nephew, a jumper with Tintin and Snowy on it. And you know, it had a few fine details. Much easier to do it after the fact. I knitted myself a Weasley sweater, like from Harry Potter, you know, with a plain sweater with a big K in the middle. And because I wanted to knit the sweater in the round, there's no way to knit the letter in at the same time, because when you knit across the row, the yarn isn't where you need it to be, knitting in the round. So I knitted the whole sweater in one color and then duplicate stitched the letter on after the fact. It's a really useful technique, and you can, you know, so you can use like cross stitch charts to get motifs to add to your knitting. And I'm just noticing, I actually made a mistake on that one. Can you tell? I've actually moved, the motif is 1 stitch closer to the X than it should be. I actually made a mistake. I am going to have to undo that. So clearly from that end, that's incorrect. So I'll just find, so because at the end, that's pretty convenient. I know where it was. There's the end. I'm going to have to unpick it, because and that's pretty glaring, self. I don't know how I didn't catch that as I was doing it. And I managed to weave in all the ends and everything too, but it's just string. We can undo it. Glad I found it now and not, you know, 6 months from now. trying to get it. Very fuzzy wool. There we go. And it looks like I did occasionally split the damn thing. I mean, I could always cut it in a pinch, but I'm trying to get it undone without minimal. Yeah, correcting errors with duplicate stitch, you're absolutely right, is another thing you cannot do if you knit the motif in. Where is that end coming from? Back here? Well, it's theoretically undoable. It's just that right now I'm having trouble finding, there it is, finding the end of the dang thing. There we go. There we go. Cool. So yeah, it's supposed to be, there's supposed to be 3 stitches between the X. So 1, 2, 3 red. So I've made it 1 stitch too close, which is why it looks off center, because it is off center. Okay, back to that last stitch, and now, okay, I just need to shift it over 1. I'll thread my needle. And I'm just going to come over, let me switch back to, so it's coming out 1 stitch, and you just need it to go be 1 stitch further to the right. So it actually needs to come out of there instead. So basically the stitch I want to duplicate is that one there. You see it's 2 legs. I want to stitch over the top of that stitch. And so to do that, I need to come through the hole below it. So I come through the hole in the middle of the stitch below it. And that leaves me 1, 2, a gap of 3. So now what I'm going to do is just follow the loop of the stitch. So I'm going to go under those 2 legs and then back down into the same hole, and that makes 1 stitch. And so I'm just going to do a little cross. Now you don't want to pull it too tight, so I'm kind of trying to adjust the tension as I go so it sits, like covers up the other stitch. That's why we call it duplicate stitch. It's kind of a nice art to getting it to lie right on top of it. I mean, it's not perfect. You'll always be able to see a little bit of the old stitch peeking out from behind. But it's a hell of a lot easier than knitting it in at the time. Okay, good. So there's 1 motif. So now the next one would be here. That's better. So you can use cross-stitch charts, as I mentioned. One thing before you go nuts doing that, I should point out, if you've ever tried doing it, you know where I'm going with this. Knitting stitches are rectangles, they're not squares. So if you use a cross-stitch design, it is probably going to look stretched out horizontally. It's not going to be square, it'll be a rectangle. And that's fine for most things. You know, if it's a flower or whatever, who cares? If you're knitting a house or something that requires it to be square, yeah, it might affect your design slightly. And so you can get knitter's graph paper. And so if you Google knitter's graph paper, there's a couple different websites. Actually, I just went down the wrong. Hang on, what have I done? That I actually went down into the wrong place, that's why. But you know what? Given that my tail's so short, I should weave it in anyway. Yeah, so knitter's graph paper. There are a couple sites where you can actually even specify your gauge, your stitch gauge and row gauge, and it will generate a PDF for you. And so that can be very handy when you're planning out a design and you want to know what it's going to look like. All right, so just take that stitch down and I'll weave it in on the back. So that's what I did when I did the big K on the front of my Weasley sweater, rather than just using a cross-stitch alphabet, because it would have, like I said, it would have been stretched out horizontally. I actually printed out a giant K, the size that I would want it on my sweater. And then I generated some knitter's graph paper and sort of laid it on top of the K and colored in the rectangular stitch squares on the graph paper. And that way I had a chart that I knew exactly that it would sort of counter the distortion of the stitches. So if you want to do your own designs, just get knitter's graph paper instead of normal graph paper, because the rectangles will mess you up. Look, that's good enough. Okay, that wove in that end. Great, fixed our error. Now I can go back to stitching a new area. So to thread my needle, all I do, and leaving a bit of a tail, is I twist up the wool. So I just give it a twist really tight, and then when you grab it, it gives you sort of a nice little hard folded nib to shove through the eye of the needle. There's no point trying to stick the end through. Okay. Cool. So I'll do that last stitch. So I'm just going to come up again. You can see the stitch I need to duplicate to finish off the little cross. It's that one there. That means I need to come up here, this hole underneath. So I'll come up from the underside and I'll make sure I come up right there in the middle of that hole. Whoop, yeah, that's right. Yeah. And I'll just turn it around so I can see and make sure I don't pull the tail all the way through. Give myself a couple inches of tail, and then just use my hand to kind of hold that on the back side. So I'll weave that in after the fact. Hang on, am I in the right place? No, I'm down in the purple, aren't I? I'm in the wrong spot. I need to be... I came up in the wrong spot. I need to be there. That hole right there. See, if you come up in the wrong place, you'll end up doing the motif in the wrong spot, as I clearly did last time. Okay, don't pull the tail all the way through. Okay. Just jump over to where the next stitch is going to be. Look, so these jumps from here to here, that's like a centimeter. That's not terribly, it's not a long way to go on the back side. When you're needing to traverse a large distance on the back, I will actually weave it on the back side, and I'll show you that. We'll get to one of those so you can see it. What are you saying, Woban? You wrap the yarn around the needle hole and then squeeze it tight and pull the needle. Oh, okay. Huh, I don't do it. Yeah, I'm not familiar with that technique. I get the gist of it. And I've got my hand on the inside of the jumper, just sort of feeling it with my other finger. Don't pull it too tight and make sure it just sits as best you can and covers the stitch. And you want a blunt needle for this. Let's talk about that, you know? A darning in needle. You do not want a sharp needle for this. And look, they make them. They make big sharp needles. I have some. Not sure why I have them. I never used them. But, well, even that one's a bit pointy. Like, I don't know if you can see that. A pointy needle will actually split the wool, you can see there. And I don't want to do that. I want to sort of go in between the yarn. So get yourself either one of those, or you can also get, I even have a couple here. You can get the plastic versions. They're absolutely fine as well. I don't use those as often. I prefer the metal, but I got those in a pinch. But yeah, make sure you have a nice blunt needle, because it will just slide under the stitches without splitting them. And the last one. Okay. And now I'll jump up to here to do, whoops, not camera. Yeah, the bent tip ones. I don't know where. I think it came in a set, and I've lost the other one. But I don't know why. The bent tip are just nice to use. I guess you can sort of, yeah. It's just a little nicer. And look, I suppose for consistency's sake, you should always, you know, go. Look, I tend to go from right to left with my stitches just because I'm right-handed. If you really wanted to be very good about this, same as with cross stitch, you'd want to be quite consistent in doing all your stitches the same direction. And I'm kind of jumping all over the place, but I don't think it matters in a jumper like this. Okay. All right, so now we've got a bigger jump to make because I need to get to the other side of this cross. I need to make the next blue dot over here. So what I'm going to do is go down to the inside and then flip it inside out. So I'll just make sure when I pull it, I don't pull it super tight, just right. Okay, there we go. I'm going to flip it inside out. Yeah. And so I know that I need to get this wool over to about there-ish. You can see my needle poking out there. So that's quite a big distance. You know, that's what, 2 inches to get across to there. So I'm not just gonna leave a giant loop on the back side. You know, get my fingers caught in that when I'm putting it on, or you know, the difficulty in maintaining that tension. So what I'm instead gonna do is just sort of weave through a couple of these floats on the back side. Just through a couple. And that, look, so now it's captured. It's not the prettiest on the inside anymore, but at least it keeps me from having a big old loop. And then that gets me about over to where I need to be. So That is perfect. So now I just need to count and make sure I come up in the right spot. Let's just triple check here. So I've got 1 red stitch, 2 red stitch, 3 red stitch. And then the next one is the one I'm going to duplicate. So yep. So that's all you do if you've got to cross a larger distance. Just seeing if it's time for a coffee yet. So obviously we're getting into Easter season, and technically from Thursday would have been the start of Fasching here in Bavaria. I'm in Munich, for those of you who don't know. I'm an American Australian, but I moved to Munich last August. And so Carnival or Mardi Gras, I guess, here it's Fasching in Bavaria. And so Thursday would have been the traditional start. They call it Weiberfastnacht, Women's Festival. And so on that Thursday would have been like lots of parties and activities across town and people dressing up in costume. And they do this thing here where apparently women run around on that day and chopping off men's neckties. Look it up on Wikipedia. It's a thing. And like if you chop off a man's necktie, then you get to, steal a kiss or something. Of course, all that's canceled. We are under lockdown. Our lockdown has been extended again, I think, to mid-March. So, which is why I'm looking so gray. I've not been to the hairdresser in 6 months. Yeah, so all of that got canceled. So Fasching is yet another thing we've missed out on this year. But I discovered that the traditional food you have on Weiberfastnacht, or Fat Thursday, is of course donuts. And to be more specific, they call them here in Bavaria Krapfen, which is not a nice name, but Krapfen, or the famous Ich bin ein Berliner, a jelly donut. They're jelly donuts. They call them Berliners in other parts of the country. Here in Bavaria, they're called Krapfen. And it's a jelly donut. And so I'm like, all right, I am not going to any parties. I'm not getting dressed up in costume and chopping off neckties. But damn it, I can have donuts. So I looked up on Google Maps where to get Krapfen on Thursday and discovered that there's a bakery, Bäckerei Zottel, not far from where we live. Actually, it's on the other side of the railroad tracks. I think it's like a big, like one of they're sort of a chain of bakeries, but it's like one of their big factories, their bigger ones. And so I walked over in the snow, and they basically sell these giant boxes, like the box, like you'd get a box of roses in, but it's got 6 jelly donuts in it. So I got that for us on Thursday, and so far we've had one a day each with our coffees. So we're down to our last with Thursday, Friday, and today's Saturday. So be having the last of the Krapfen here in a bit. I bought 2 traditional, and the traditional seem to be filled with an apricot jam and dusted with powdered sugar. That's the traditional one, the classicer, she described it as. And then I got 2 Kirsch, which is cherry, sour cherry. And those are dusted with cinnamon. Those are very nice, actually. I like those a lot. And then the third ones were vanilla, which have chocolate on top, like a traditional sort of chocolate filled, cream donut you'd get in the States. But it's got this sort of, I was expecting like a creme anglaise, like a custard inside, but it's more of like a whipped cream, I guess, with a chocolate glaze on it. And that was very nice too. So we've missed out on Oktoberfest. We've missed out on the Christmas markets. We've missed out on Fasching. What are you going to do? Other people have it a lot worse. Okay. Does So you can tell, you can even see it's phrased up a bit. Like, you know, the double thickness, you do get, it is thicker there, but it's fine. You know, I wouldn't do it all over. Like if I was knitting something like with polka dots all over it, I probably wouldn't duplicate stitch them. I would knit it flat and use intarsia to knit them in, because you wouldn't want to have that much of the garment be double thickness. But for this, given it was limited to one little area, it's a lot easier than knitting it in. If I was using a thicker wool, I also might avoid duplicate stitch, just because it would be so bulky. It works better in a finer. Oh my God, we watched Sanditon. Anybody watch Sanditon? Yeah. Well, I'd seen this list on BuzzFeed that was like, if you liked Bridgerton, you'll like. Folks, that article is crap. So the first thing it recommended to us was the BBC adaptation of Bleak House, which is the Charles Dickens from 2005. It's got Gillian Anderson in it. It's quite good. It's very nice. It's Charles Dickens. It is not Bridgerton in the sense that there's no nudity, there's no sexy times, there's no anachronistic Ariana Grande music being played in the bowl. It's quite good Regency costume drama, not Bridgerton. And then, all right, we gave it another go. We watched Sanditon, because I'd heard people say, oh, Sanditon's very good. It was adapted from a Jane Austen, a fragment of a Jane Austen, which I'd never read. But it was done by Andrew Davies, who also did the original Pride and Prejudice, which I loved. But he did Bleak House. So, and Bleak House was fine. It just wasn't what I expected. Well, Sanditon was much closer to Bridgerton. It was not maybe as explicit as Bridgerton, but you still had some people with their shirts off, and you had some people getting busy in the woods. And so, you know, that was a bit Gossip Girly. But you get to end of like episode 8 or 9 or whatever the final episode is, and it ends on a massive cliffhanger, and I'm like, what? And then I find out it was meant to be an ongoing show, and it didn't get renewed, so there's absolutely no ending. You're like, what? What the hell did you... Why did I watch this? So yeah, Sanditon, I cannot in good conscience recommend. It was a massive waste of time. And also, she picked the wrong guy anyway, so... Massive waste. What am I doing? I've only got a short tail. This is the thing. You don't want to use every scrap of it, because you need to weave it in on the back side, so... Alright. Let's weave that in on the back side. You think the double thickness lends it a nice texture? It does. It does. I mean, just depends on whether you mind that or not. Not being particularly tidy in where I weave this in on the back side, because it's embroidery, like it's not, you know, load bearing. It's just decorative. And then we started watching the new version of His Dark Materials, because my sister said she and her kids were enjoying it. And look, I read the books a long time ago, and I remember enjoying the books. But when I saw they'd cast Lin-Manuel Miranda as Lee Scoresby, I did a double take, because he's not who I imagined as Lee Scoresby in my mind. That was Sam Elliott through and through. But anyway, we watched the first episode of the new series, and I don't know, does it get better? Because I was bored and it was well cast. But my God, I just found it really boring. And I found it was explaining things too much, you know, like in this world, everyone has souls, are animals called demons. And I don't remember the books spelling that stuff out so much. You know, I remember having a little bit more delight at figuring out the rules of that universe. Whinge, whinge, whinge. How much embroidery do I have left to do? Okay, there you go. You can see. So I finished that one, and then 1, 2, 3. 3 more to go. Obviously, look, I could pull off a really long bit of wool, but the idea then is it gets tangled. So you don't want to use too long a piece. Look, that's the start of the round there, actually. You can tell because of the jog. See in the gold, you can see the jog. So for those of you who've not knitted things in the round, when you knit in the round, it's actually a spiral. It goes around and around in a spiral, which means that if you're doing stripes or you're doing a design, you have a point where you start the next row. You have to have a point. And so for me, it was this side seam, which means there's a jog. Look, it's along the side on the underarm. You're not going to notice it very much. And I actually, that's why I had all those numbers written on the pattern. I did the math to figure out how to get it so that every pattern is continuous. So, you know, it is continuous across, even though there's a jog, which helps disguise it, I think. You know, your eyes don't notice it too much, except like the gold one there, for example, you really notice. But the rest of it, if I hadn't told you, you might not have spotted it. Okay, let's go back to that chevron we were doing. So again, I'll pull it and just make sure, flip it over and make sure I'm not pulling it all the way out on the back side. Leave a couple inches. You definitely do not want to pull these tight. Like it'll actually sit on top better if you leave it a little loose. Remember what we're trying to do is get it to just cover up the stitch underneath. So if you just joined us, you missed the three needle cast off shoulder action. Go back to the beginning of the stream and watch it. But we joined our shoulder seams. There's one of them there. And I went and tried it on and it's looking good. I mean, it does need a block, but you know, what knitting doesn't look better with a block? So I'm weaving in ends and doing some embroidery here while I decide the sleeves. What I need to do is I need to look at the sleeve pattern and the relative frequency of the colors and see if the fact that I'm almost out of the gray is going to be a showstopper there or not. Yeah. I think the short sleeve idea is gone. I think because it's a baggier style, I feel like the short sleeve would have worked better with a more closer fitting, less ease in the garment. But with it being so oversized, I think it's either vest or long sleeves. I'm kind of leaning towards the sleeves if I have enough wool. All right, so now we're gonna do a big jump again. I need to go from here over to here. So again, I'll turn it inside out. And I'm just gonna, again, I need to jump to about over here-ish. So I'm just gonna weave it through a couple of the floats on the back side. And that gets me to about there-ish, which is about where I want to be. All right, so again, red, 1, 2, 3. pull it. Don't pull it too tight on the back side either. I want to leave it, again, nice, even. Like, you want your knitting to be stretchy, you know? So I don't want to pull it too tight on the back side. Just make sure I'm in the right spot. So 1 red stitch. Remember, stitches are V's. There's 2 red stitch, 3 red stitch. And that's when I start my chevron on the 4th one. Woben, you're not still here. You must go to bed. Oh my god. Vampire. I said it's impossible to cover up the stitch perfectly. So if you need pixel perfect, then knit it in instead. Your sleep schedule is, I thought I was a night owl. You're pretty bad. I am staying up late tonight. We're doing the Good Weekend trivia quiz with some friends back in Australia. So promised I would stay up until they wake up and do it with them over Zoom. If people have any techniques they want to ask about, just feel free to put it in the chat. I don't know if I should be like encouraging more conversation or if you're all just working away on your own projects. Usually on Sundays about this time I start picking up some folks from the UK. So if we've got any UK visitors, welcome. I normally stream on Sundays. Today's unusual, and it was basically because I couldn't wait to do those shoulders and try it on. And I didn't want to do the shoulders without doing it together so that you could see how to do it. Three needle cast off is actually my knitting celebrity claim to fame. Many years ago, back in Sydney, I was working, managing a knitting shop, Morris & Sons, which used to be called Tapestry Craft back in the city. And it's on York Street in the CBD. And I taught classes for them, among other things. And we got a call one day. My boss said to me, hey, you free like Tuesday after work? I'm like, yeah, what? He's like, some like presumably rich lady wants a private knitting class at her house. I'm like, you're kidding me. He's like, nah, she's in East Sydney and she just wants someone experienced to help her with some projects. Okay, I'll do it. Sure. He's like, yeah, I'll drive you over. So we went over there and we went to this address in East Sydney and didn't know who I was meeting, didn't have any idea what they wanted help with, get led into a really nice place, and I'm sitting waiting for the person. I'm sitting like in the foyer, and they're like, oh, CM will be with you soon. CM's coming. And I'm looking around, and this would have been in like 2004, like, 16 years ago. And I'm like, there's a Moulin Rouge poster on the wall. There's all this like Indian stuff, like furnishings. I'm like, CM. Holy crap, Catherine Martin. That's Baz Luhrmann's wife. She's the Oscar-winning costume designer. Am I sitting in Baz Luhrmann's house right now? So I text my husband. And of course, this is pre-iPhone. I can't just Google this on my phone. I had a Nokia 3310. This was in 2004. So I text my husband and I'm like, quick, find a photo of Baz Luhrmann's wife, Catherine Martin, because I think I'm in her house. And so he goes off to do that. He's at home. And so meanwhile, CM, who is indeed Catherine, CM comes in to meet me, and we go back. She was blonde. She was heavily pregnant then with their child. And she pulls out a ginormous box of Rowan, where she is knitting this insane calf facet full-length Rowan coat in all like intarsia and Fair Isle and amazing. And she knitted the whole thing up to the shoulders. And she's like, I don't know how to do the shoulder seams. And I'm thinking like, I'm going to be giving knitting lessons to an Oscar-winning costume designer. But then I look at the thing and I'm like, oh, well, you could do a 3-needle cast off on this. She's like, how do I do that? It says to do that. I don't know how to do that. I'm like, oh, easy. So I'm teaching her to do this. So I show her how to do it. Meanwhile, my husband is texting me and he's like, it's her. Because you could actually do MMS. And so he texted me a photo of her and I'm like, okay. So we hung out for a couple hours, and yeah, she's obviously amazing designer, fairly accomplished knitter, like clearly doesn't have a lot of time for her knitting. I think she'd been working on that coat for a long time. But they were gearing up at that time for his film Australia. So they were just getting ready to fly out to the outback after, I think, the birth of her child to work on the movie. And so ended up in the kitchen hanging out with her. I think I ended up going over there like twice. But I remember at the end of the night, I had to sign an NDA, basically saying that if I saw anything related to the film production, I, obviously wouldn't disclose that. And I'm like, of course. I'm like, but can I tell my friends? And they're like, that I was here and met you? And they're like, yeah, sure. So I'm like, oh my God. Obviously Baz wasn't there. I think he was on the film, getting ready for the film. But yeah, I immediately got in the car. Albert picked me up. I got in the car and like immediately texted like everyone I know. Oh my God, I was just at Baz Luhrmann's house teaching Catherine Martin how to do a 3-needle shoulder cast off. And I think I might have met with her twice, and then she must, I didn't hear from her again. So I suspect she had her baby, and then the film production kicked off. So, but that was my knitting celebrity claim to fame. The one time I gave knitting lessons to an Oscar-winning costume designer. It's a great fun for whenever I have to do one of those like 2 truths and a lie. I've been to Baz Luhrmann's house. Because people are like, yeah, right, Australian. It's truth, mate. Oh, there's my husband. Coffee time? Yay! Just tell him I'm finishing a bit, and then I'll go to have my coffee and donut. What have I done? Didn't pull it all the way through. That was like one of my only good retail stories from the knitting shop. Most of them are tales of horror. You know, terrible customers. People calling up and asking me if I have yarn in certain colors and using very offensive terms for those colors. See, we had a guy come in and steal a laptop out of the shop once. We had a couple people come in because we were open late one night and the knitting shop was downstairs and had a back entrance, and we had a couple sort of people that were clearly off their nut on drugs come in one night and just sort of creeped out the staff, which is why we started doing Thursday night Stitch and Bitch in the store, just to have more people around. All right, time to do that big jump again. Just finish pulling that through. Okay. There was my encounter with the Fluffy scene. Fluffy's like a furry, but a Fluffy is into Angora sweaters. We had a little man come in wearing I don't want to get stuck up on gender conforming, but what had been, I think, probably sold as a woman's Angora jumper. Old man came in wearing it and asked what it would cost to knit him one just like it. And we did knitting for hire. So I was like, all right, I'll cost it up. In 8-ply Angora, which was one of the most, Angora is a very, very, very fluffy wool. It's from Angora's from a goat, isn't it? No, mohair's from a goat. Angora's from a rabbit, I think. Very, very, very fluffy. He was fuzzy. It was white, and it was this white fluffy jumper. He wanted another one. Okay, fine. $8, an 8-ply ball of that alpaca was $35 Australian. And we worked out he was going to need like 10 of them. So it was going to be like $350 just for the materials. And then we estimated another $350 to knit it. $700 to knit this sweater for him. And that's probably giving him a bit of a discount too, to be honest with you. Nobody knits to save money these days. It's expensive. And I mean, that in 8-ply, a man's jumper probably would take me between 15 and 20 hours. So nobody's getting minimum wage off that. And I said, all right, to get started on this, you need to put down a 50% deposit. So you'll need to give $350. And look, not to cast aspersions, he didn't look like the kind of guy who had $350 to spare. I kind of expected when I said $700 that was going to scare him off. And he went, okay. Came back in 2 hours later and plunked down $750s on the table. Okay, I'm knitting you an Angora sweater. I didn't knit it. We had a couple knitters for hire who did it. So I took his measurements, and we had nice little old lady knitted him a man's 8-ply crew neck sweater in white Angora. And I wrote this up on my blog back in the day, and it got picked up on a Fluffy message board, which is a message board for people who really fetishize wearing fluffy wool. And it was actually they were all very nice about it. They were like, oh, isn't this lovely? Wouldn't you love someone to knit you a sweater like this? Oh, well. Takes all kinds. Fluffy man was actually nice. Red and the Wolf. Oh, a raid. Wow. Who's raiding me? Oh, Putty Tat Purr. Thanks, Putty Tat Purr. Just as I was telling stories from my days working in the knitting shop. Hello, everyone. Great to have you with us. Just doing a bit of embroidery here. So let me show you where I'm up to on the fair aisle. The front and back are done, folks. Let me zoom out. Check it out. We have a V neckline. We have shoulder seams. If you go back, yeah, it worked out. If you go back to the start of this stream, you can see me do the 3-needle cast off for the shoulders. So I did short row shaping on the shoulders and then did a 3-needle cast off of the live stitches. You did a raid, but it hasn't worked? I think it did work. Oh, I know, Red, you made pattern, but I don't know what I'm going to knit. Oh, my brain is only full of this. I know, I thought about that the other day. I need to go pick out one of your patterns. It's good to see you all. So yeah, I'm deciding now. I tried it on. It looks good. I'm very happy. Whether I'm going to knit the sleeves on or not. And while I think about that, I am doing some embroidery, some duplicate stitch, because this motif here, as written, had 3 colors per row, and that's nuts. Nobody's got time for that. So I ended up doing 2 colors per row, and I'm duplicate stitching on the little teal chevrons as I go. That's very kind of you. Yeah, I have to figure out how to do a raid. I tried to do one last time and I didn't get it to work. So I don't know. I need to look up how to do it before I try it. Hey, if any of you who just joined me, if you have any Rowan felted tweed in your stash, please check and see if you have color carbon. It's the gray, because I need a ball. And I've checked several German yarn stores and none of them have any stock. And I think because of Brexit, they have no clear time frame on when they'll be getting more. And it's the gray that's used in the corrugated ribbing. And I've only got a tiny bit left. So yeah, I think I'm going to need to try and find... I'm going to have to go on Ravelry and see if anyone's got it in their stash on Ravelry that's willing to post it to me. Or I guess, worst case scenario, use a different color. Yeah, I was just telling you, arrived at a very funny time. I was telling the story of I was working in the knitting shop and we ended up knitting an Angora sweater for a lovely gentleman who turned out to be part of the fluffy subculture. And he wrote up a positive, well, I wrote it on my blog and then someone else gave us a nice review on a fluffy message board that, you know, it was very kind of us to knit this sweater for this man and make him so happy. I'm just doing duplicate stitch, as I said, because I did not want to knit 3 colors in one row. So this is also called Swiss darning, and it's basically I'm just stitching directly over the stitch underneath. So it's a form of embroidery, and you kind of want to, don't pull it too tight. You want to kind of, it's not a perfect, it doesn't, like you will see a little bit of the background poke through. It's not a perfect match, but if you have small spots of color, it's often more convenient than trying to knit it in. I was saying I knitted myself one of the, you know, the Weasley sweaters like in Harry Potter. And I knitted the jumper in the round, knitted the sweater in the round, and then used duplicate stitch to embroider the big K on the front, rather than try and knit it in intarsia. Only got one more set to go, and then the embroidery's done. And I've still got a gazillion ends to weave in. All right, so I need to traverse a longer distance on this one, so I'll flip it inside out. And I'll just weave through some of the floats on the back side, just so I don't have a big old loop across the back of the work. That gets me roughly over to where I need to be. 1, 2, 3. Just count again, make sure I'm not in the wrong spot. 1 stitch, 2 stitch, 3 stitch, 4 stitch. I mean, it might have actually been easier to, if I'd blocked this, it might have actually looked a little nicer because the stitches would have been a little bit more even before I did the embroidery, but in a pattern like this, I think it being a little rustic is fine. Besides, this felted tweed is kind of slubby, like it's not a uniformly consistent thickness, the wool. So you've got some stitches that are thicker than others anyway. So see on that one, you got a little bit of the red poking through, but it's fine. Pulled that one too tight. Gonna loosen it up. Almost done. And I don't think, I was hoping I'd have enough on this thread to do that, finish it, but I think I'm gonna have to get another one. It's annoying. All right, I will weave in now. Go to the back side. I'm not, I said I'm gonna weave in the end, but I'm not being like super neat about it. just discovered it doesn't poke through on the front. You don't see any weaving in the ends. This wool's very forgiving and fuzzy, so I don't have to be super precious about it. That's good enough. I'll just get one more short bit just to do that last little bit. Farrell doesn't agree with you, Red. Oh no, it's just patience. And being able to fight with a lot of ends. You know, there's quite a lot of ends in here I still have to weave in. But I secretly kind of enjoy that. Okay, where am I? This last little set of chevron. Just make sure I don't pull it all the way through on the back side. And the last one. So yeah, if you want to see the 3 needle cast off, go back to the beginning of the stream. It'll be on my Twitch page for 2 weeks, and then they get archived over to my YouTube page, so you can see the previous ones there. But yeah, I rewrote the pattern to, instead of doing a stair-step cast off on the shoulders, to do short row shaping on the shoulders using a Knitty article, which is in the chat. So rather than casting off in that sort of stair-steppy way, you leave the stitches live and use short rows. And then, and yeah, I did a 3 needle cast off to make the shoulder seams. And look, here we are, last stitch of embroidery. Didn't need that much thread in the end, did I? Okay. Again, this is only embroidery. It's not like supporting any weight of the garment, so I don't have to worry about weaving it in a lot. Oh, Red, I was showing off earlier my new purchase I bought myself. Check this beast out. I got it off Amazon. This is the world's most powerful sweater shaver. It cost me nearly 30 euros. And, let me show you what it looks like. That's the kit. Someone was saying it looks like a personal massager. Yeah, I suppose it kind of does. But it comes with like spare blades, you know. It's height adjustable. This is the sweater shaver of my dreams. And so the other day I just went nuts on a couple of the sweaters I've knitted that were quite pilly. And so, example, like Lenatus, which I only just finished, a few months back, and it's in a sort of that 4-ply merino. It was already starting to pill under the arms, you can see there. And so this sucker, once I got done with it, you can see what it looked like on the right. It's like a brand new garment. So I'm very happy with the beast so far. Very satisfying thing to do in these chaotic times, to make your knitting like new again. And look, I think, let's just double check. I think that's all the embroidery done. Ultra wide. Just make sure I didn't miss any. Nope, 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 nope. I think we're good. All right, I am gonna call it a day, folks, because I have coffee and a krapfen, a donut, a jelly donut waiting for me downstairs. But I will be back tomorrow at usual time, around lunchtime. And so hopefully I will have decided what I'm doing with the sleeves by then. So I will see you all tomorrow. Thanks for joining me. And I hope you learned a new technique today and you have a lovely weekend. See you, everybody.